Every 2 weeks I do the panic index. And yet I feel like I need to do a video today on the Washington Capitals. The Washington Capitals right now, not in an unfamiliar place. And yet every year we have a conversation at some point about whether or not everything's on fire. Right now it's not. But I understand why Capitals fans think it is. But let's just take a look at it, where they're at statistically right now, compare it to last year and the year before, because it's interesting. So 2017-2018, this team won a Stanley Cup. Going into the playoffs, nobody expected that. They were 38-23-7 at this point 2 years ago. Right now, they're 41-20-7. So they're 3 games ahead of where they were 2 years ago when they were champs. They were 5-5 in their last 10 at this point. They're 4-4-2 in their last 10 right now. Is not completely out of the realm of comparison. Over their last 5 games, coming up to game 68, they had won at San Jose. They had lost in regulation at LA. They had lost at Anaheim. They won at home against Toronto. They won at home against Ottawa. So not a great time overall. It was a kind of a rough time. They'd actually won 5 of their last 11. They had lost the 11 game preceding 2. So I'm just pointing out, if I went over the last 11 games, they would be 5-6. So this was not fantastic. And not only that, but going into the 2017-18 season, the belief was Washington's time had probably passed. This was a team that didn't look as deep on paper as they had in years prior. And some of their fourth line guys were, And then, of course, we know they ended up winning it. Now, they did win it. Last year, they were out in round 1. We'll get to last year. Goals for, they were number 9 in the NHL in 2017-2018. Right now, they're second in goals for per game. Goals against, they were 15th. This year, they're 18th overall. So, again, defense, not fantastic. They've never had fantastic defense in any of the last 3 seasons. As an overall, they've had fantastic defense. You don't win the Stanley Cup without being able to play it. But on average, not so much. Now, your key players. Now, Carlson could be talked about as a key player. He's having a career year. But it comes down to Ovechkin and likely Braden Holtby. Ovechkin had 49 goals, 38 assists, 87 points in the year they won the Stanley Cup 2 years ago. Holtby was 34-16-4 with a .907 save percentage. Now, what gets lost in this is that by the end of the season, Grubauer had taken his job. Holtby was done. He was washed up. Yeah. He had the Vezina, but he's no good anymore, kind of thing. And so we go into the playoffs, and immediately, Grubauer, it doesn't work. Holtby takes over, and he wins the Stanley Cup. Now, they would end up 49-26-7 as their overall record from this. Now, they were 11-3 after this point. So I agree that the Capitals do need to kind of get on a hot streak. It definitely helps going into the playoffs. Winning 11 out of 14, you feel confident, you feel good about the team. Now, last season, 2018-2019, they were 40-21-7. So right now they're 41-20-7. Really isn't a difference there. But they were 8-2 in their last 10. And for Capitals fans, this team actually kind of looked better at many points last year. And they were in the midst of a long winning streak. They had won against New Jersey. They won against Philadelphia. They had a shootout win at the New York Rangers. At the Islanders, they won. And at home against Ottawa, they won as well. So that's 5 wins in their last 5 games when they'd passed game number 68. They were out in round 1. But the interesting part is, goals for, they were 5th in the NHL. So they actually scored more, at least in relation to the rest of the league. Goals against, 17th. Yeah, that suffered. But the overall numbers, really, really similar to the year before. They lost in round 1 in Game 7 against Carolina Hurricanes, an absolute stunner. Ovechkin, last year, 51 goals, 38 assists, 89 points. He's pretty consistently at or above 50 goals, or in the case of 2017-2018, just below. Holtby, 32 wins, 19 losses, 5 overtime losses, 911 save percentage. His numbers were actually a little bit better last year than the year before. And yet, they're out in round 1. They ended up 48-26-8, 104 points, down from 105 the year before, but they were 8-5-1 after this point last year. So they did have a bit of a downbeat. And it's something that we don't talk a lot about, and we should. Because last year going to the playoffs, Tampa had a bit of a stumble down the stretch. Calgary had a bit of a stumble down the stretch. People said, well, they're resting players. Don't worry about it. They're top team. Don't worry about it. You don't overblow it. But there is something to be said for going into the playoffs hot rather than lukewarm or playing pretty well, because the team you're up against, if you're a top seed, is one that's been playing playoff hockey for months. It is a team that has been fighting for its life every single game for months. So they've likely been at that playoff intensity level for quite a while. Now, this year's Washington Capitals, who some fans are panicked about, over their last 5, they won at Pittsburgh. They had an overtime loss at the New York Rangers, which was absolutely insane because of Banajad show. They lost at home against Philadelphia, who were the hottest team in the league. They won at Minnesota, which is no small feat. Minnesota 7-3 in their last 10, and they lost at Winnipeg. Winnipeg 6-3-1 in their last 10. So yes, they're 2-2-1 over their last 5, 4-4-2 over their last 10. It's been a mixed bag. But right now in goals for, they are number 2, as I said. Goals against, they're 18th in the league, which is lower than the other 2 years, but not by a ton. They have a couple of really good defensive games. They can pull themselves up from 18th, and it's not really a huge issue. Now, Ovechkin, 67 games played, 47 goals, 18 assists, 65 points. He likely will shatter the 51 goals he had last year. He's going to pass the 49 he had the year before. What's interesting to me with Ovechkin this year, not very many assists. One criticism that was leveled at Ovechkin over the years was that he was selfish. And there were points where he should pass the puck and he decides to take the shot instead. I don't have the statistics to say that he's 20 assists off last year's total right now, while he's only 4 goals off. I don't have the stats to necessarily say he's not passing enough. But what happens is, and this is something Patrick Laine's figuring out as his career goes along, if you're not passing the puck, you're not putting up assists, it makes it easier for a team to defend against your team. So his points totals may be very similar. He may end up getting 55 goals this year. He could go on a run and score 60. He's one of those few players who's capable of doing that. But in a playoff series, if he's not anybody you have to worry about the pass with, it makes it a little bit easier to defend against the Capitals. So that, to me, is more of a red flag than almost anything else I can find when I look at just the overall stats. Holtby, 25, 14, and 5 right now. He does have an .897 save percentage. That is low. But honestly, Samsonov, his numbers have come down a bit over the last month or so. And I think it's a reflection more of the defense in front of them. But keep in mind, 2 years ago, we were talking about Washington's defense not being good enough either, and panning the addition of Michael Kempny is probably not enough to put them over the top when it absolutely helped them do that. They're on pace right now at first in the Metro to 107 points. Now, whether or not they end up first in the Metro, I don't think it matters. 107 points, that would be more by 2 than the year they won the Stanley Cup. More by 3 than last year when they lost in the first round. I think when you're looking at the Capitals, you have to say to yourself, okay, so if they finish second, they'll likely match up with either Philadelphia or Pittsburgh, depending on what happens there. Probably Pittsburgh. I like their chances against Pittsburgh right now, because while it's easy to look at Washington and poke holes in their game, I think with Pittsburgh you can do that too. And I think a lot of it is similar. You can look at their defense, you can look at their goaltending, and you can say, well, Jari's been good, but his numbers have kind of come down. Matt Murray's having a subpar season, much like Holtby. So maybe that's where they're most vulnerable. And if you look at them against, if it ended up between them and Philadelphia, I do like Philadelphia's chances in that. So just throwing that out there. But if they finish first and they go up against a wild card in that first round, whether it's the Rangers, Carolina, the Islanders, Columbus, I kind of like their chances against all of them. Rangers might just be that team that can go on a miracle run if they make the playoffs this year. But I still think Washington's in good shape to at least get out of the first round, which they didn't do last year. And I'm not ruling them out. Now, before the season started, I had the Capitals as number 1 on my power rankings, and I picked them to win the Stanley Cup. I have not changed that prediction, because I think if you change that prediction every month, it loses all meaning. And also, I haven't seen anything in the Capitals game right now so far, anything on this roster to tell me these guys can't win a Stanley Cup. Because a lot of the red flags I would totally be on side with pointing out to you guys right now, I was pointing out 2 years ago. 2 years ago, I was saying, no, Capitals, they can't win this. They're not going to win this. I know people are going to point to Todd Reirden and say Todd Reirden being the coach, it's not the same as it was under Barry Trotz. To that I say, yes, that makes a difference. Yes, Barry Trotz is a great coach. However, their overall numbers are not entirely different. And if they get depth scoring, if their defense holds up, if Holtby gets his game in gear, all of these things happened 2 years ago. So when people say there's too many ifs, it all happened 2 years ago. I do think it can happen again. Once a team has won a Stanley Cup, it doesn't get easier to win the second one, but you know what you need to do to win that second one. That's why Pittsburgh has 3 with Crosby in their lineup. And for Ovechkin, 1 is not going to be enough for him. So I don't rule out his desire, his ability to lead the team, which was in question 2 years ago, right? I do think that it's going to be a difficult run for whoever comes out of the Metro, but it could very well still be Washington. So while there's a lot of people who are focusing on their recent issues and the fact that they're not playing great hockey and they're having their struggles, I was saying all the same things 2 years ago when they were 15th on my power rankings, and I was like, well, Washington's not winning anything, and then they did. They went on a nice run towards the end of the year. So where I will agree with Capitals fans who may be concerned is this team needs to go on a run. They need to go on a run, and they need to start now. They need to get their game in gear, get set up, go into the playoffs as one of the hotter teams. If they're going to make that run happen, if they're going to win that second Stanley Cup, it kind of has to start now. Because when we look at teams that win Stanley Cups, they are normally hot going into the playoffs. They're already playing that game. They already know what they need to do, and then they just keep playing that game in the playoffs. Washington has to find that. I know there are some who've lost faith. I haven't. I still think they've got an excellent chance. But let me know what you guys think in the comment section below. As always, don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through. You just happened upon this video. Thank you guys so much for watching, for all your support. I will talk to you again soon.